The energy crisis is about to make everything unaffordable.
Governments across multiple continents are suddenly restricting daily movement, demanding citizens stay home and drastically reduce their travel. In Vietnam, officials are urging citizens to swap their motorbikes for bicycles and rely on carpools to slash transport demand. The Philippines just mandated a 4-day workweek for government employees. At the exact same time, European airports are quietly drafting contingency plans to operate with a complete absence of aviation fuel. This sudden freeze on movement serves a singular purpose: conserving power. These are the emergency protocols of a global economy that is physically running out of fuel. National reserves are draining at a pace that cannot be sustained, pushing the global economy toward a functional standstill. The reason this crisis is hitting all at once comes down to physical geography.
Could the average person actually keep up if energy costs double again?
And a concept known as the 30-day rule. When energy leaves the Persian Gulf, it takes roughly 28 to 30 days for these massive carriers to cross the ocean and reach major ports in Europe and Asia. Because of extreme geopolitical disruptions over the last month, the vessels arriving at the docks today have almost nothing sailing behind them. The ocean transit time provided a month-long buffer for governments to figure out alternatives. That clock has now run out. The physical shockwave of the geopolitical conflict has crossed the ocean. What was a localized dispute is now an unavoidable shortage sitting on our shores. The vast majority of the world's energy doesn't flow freely across open oceans. It is forced through a few highly congested physical bottlenecks. Narrow passages, like the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb, function as the primary arteries of global trade, leaving them highly vulnerable to blockades. These routes only stay open because of an invisible security apparatus, physical military protection, enforced by massive naval fleets. That military presence determines commercial viability. It is the absolute prerequisite for the maritime insurance that allows these tankers to legally operate. If naval protection wavers, underwriting institutions like Lloyd's of London are forced to immediately drop their coverage on those ships. Without commercial insurance, a captain cannot sail. The ships drop anchor wherever they are, severing the supply chain overnight. When those ships stop moving, the first and most visible impact is a violent spike in the cost of gasoline and diesel. But fuel is a tiny fraction of the problem. Crude oil and natural gas are the literal feedstocks for modern infrastructure. They dictate everything from baseline grid electricity to the chemical makeup of asphalt we drive on. This flowchart tracks how the disruption spreads. Natural gas is the core ingredient in commercial fertilizer. When gas supplies drop, fertilizer costs spike, agricultural yields decline, and global food prices surge. A logistical dispute in a distant shipping lane translates directly into a massive increase on your grocery receipt. This creates a macroeconomic trap. As energy and food prices soar, inflation rebounds aggressively, stripping central banks of their ability to cut interest rates. Faced with high borrowing costs and shrinking profit margins, the corporate sector reacts by slashing payrolls, which is why companies like Oracle have suddenly announced tens of thousands of layoffs. The stress bleeds directly into private credit markets. Anxious investors rush to pull their capital, forcing massive funds to freeze redemptions just to avoid total collapse. This cycle shows how a physical bottleneck at sea turns into a financial one on land. As energy costs trap central banks and credit markets begin to freeze, the logistical crisis evolves into a broad liquidity crisis. For over a decade, Western politicians have insisted the global economy was rapidly transitioning away from its reliance on fossil fuels. Yet, in order to survive the immediate shortfall, many of those same nations are now quietly restarting highly polluting coal-fired power plants. The panic over a single maritime choke point proves that our modern infrastructure remains entirely dependent on reliable fossil fuels. We are watching a cascading failure that mirrors the extreme energy rationing and systemic vulnerability seen in the 1970s. True energy security requires resilient domestic baseload power, like nuclear generation, that produces massive amounts of electricity completely immune to distant naval blockades. Until nations build realistic, self-contained energy grids, the global economy will remain exactly one blocked strait away from a total recession.